Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Jason Clemmons, chiropractor. Have to say that at the Rock Health and Wellness Centers, and you are listening to Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. It is Thursday night, September 14th, and we are coming to you live from our studio right here in the Rock Health and Wellness Center in Lubbock, Texas. We are also streaming on Facebook, on YouTube, on X. I guess I need to just start saying that and calling it X. If you don't know what X is, it used to be Twitter. So we're live on those three social media networks, and we're also live on 98.7 FM Walk by Faith Radio, 1420 AM Lubbock Christian Nation. We're coming to you on 987radio.com and on the Live 365 app. So if you've got someone around the country who would like to listen to the show and they would like to listen to it on the radio, that gives us an opportunity. They can catch us on 987radio.com on the internet, or they can catch us on the Live 365 app. You just download the app from the App Store, and you can listen to the radio. Just look for Walk by Faith, and you can find us there. And maybe we can help you. Maybe we can help some of your family members. Maybe we can help your friends, wherever they might be. And so that's what this show is all about, really. This show is brought to you in order to help you live a better life, and that's pretty much the foundation of the whole show. We're trying to get as much information to you as we can. We're learning as we go. I've gotten some feedback this week that from a couple of different patients that we were getting a little bit too technical, and when we got a little bit too technical, we lost them. And so I guess that's one of my downfalls right there, is getting a little bit too technical, getting a little bit too intense about some of this stuff that we do. But we've had some really good shows, and I'm going to try to go back tonight and kind of lighten it up just a little bit. Maybe not too much, but maybe we'll lighten it up just a little bit and try to share some simple ideas that we've shared with you that some of them might have been a little bit confusing or too much information, too intensive information. And so maybe we can go back and make some of that make a little bit more sense to you. So we're going to kind of try to review some of that information with you tonight. We had a really good show last night. We broke down The Body Keeps the Score. We had lots of engagement about that. We had lots of comments about that. I've heard about that several times throughout the day today. I'm really glad. I really hope that that was able to reach out and touch someone. I hope that you learned something about that book, or if maybe at least, if nothing else, you just kind of got some information about the book that you say, hey, I want to go read that book, or listen to Dr. Vanderkolk and try to find out more about what happens with trauma. I've had 2 or 3 times today with different patients that saw the show and had the opportunity to kind of dive into that a little bit deeper with them, so that they can kind of understand exactly how that works and based on what the book is teaching. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have that background in those areas. So I lean on those guys to teach me those things so that I can try to help our patients here in the office. And you might ask, if after 2 weeks of this show, and we've covered some things that maybe you didn't think a chiropractor covered. And you're like, why is a chiropractor talking about some of this stuff? Well, I want to make sure that it's very clear exactly why I'm talking about this stuff. And it goes back in my office. When I went to work at chiropractic in March of 2000, I had been getting adjusted for 12 years. I had injured my shoulder in a high school football game, and there was a chiropractor in town that took care of athletes. And I got sent to that chiropractor. I got my first adjustment when I was 17 years old. And then my brother-in-law was a chiropractor. The girl I was dating, who's now my wife, Leslie, her sister's husband was a chiropractor and still is, and has a tremendous influence on me even to this day about what I'm doing every single day in my office. Because one of the thing that he taught me in March of 2000 was the word subluxation. And if you got a group of chiropractors together, it's kind of like what we talked about with nutrition. If you get a group of you start talking about nutrition, it's almost like talking about religion with the Baptists and the Methodists and the Church of Christ and the Presbyterians and the Lutherans or whatever, right? As soon as you start talking about that, all of a sudden everybody gets fussy. Well, if you get a bunch of chiropractors together and you start talking about subluxation, it's not going to take 2 or 3 sentences, and all of them are going to get fussy. It's hard to find a group of chiropractors that will get together and agree on that. And the trend is we need to be more like medical doctors. We need to move more and integrate and make sure that we're communicating with the same type of language that the medical doctors are. And, I guess at some point along the way, I just kind of became old school. I became an old guy. I know I feel like the same way when I'm watching football. It's like, on fourth down, we just always used to punt. It was just a different world that we lived in, right? And it's kind of that same thing with chiropractic. I learned in March of 2000 what a subluxation was. And after getting adjusted for 12 years, it like clicked. It was just like it was an aha moment. And I've been working on that for 23 years now, 23 and a half. I guess we're getting close to 24 years. I've been working on that one foundational thing for 23 years. And that is the interference in your nervous system. That's what subluxation means. It's one of the first things I taught my kids when my kids were born. My son was adjusted when he was 2 weeks old. My daughter was adjusted when she was 9 days old. When I was coaching football when my son was born, and I didn't know anything about that. And then when my daughter was born, I was actually working in chiropractic, but my chiropractor was I think he was in the Bahamas or something like that when she was born. So it took a few days before he got back, before she got her first adjustment. And you'd say like, I don't understand that. I don't understand why you would adjust a baby. Why does a baby need an adjustment? Well, if your paradigm comes from the 1950s or the 1960s or the 1970s, or you have no idea what chiropractic is about, then because that paradigm turned into this back pain thing, right? People think that I go to the chiropractor because I have back pain or neck pain. And that's not what chiropractic is about to me. That may be what chiropractic is about to some chiropractors. That may be how they sell their office. And do I take care of people with back pain? Sure, all day long, right? But the reason they have back pain is because they have interference in their nervous system. The reason that their body's not functioning properly is because they got their body in an environment that's incongruent with health. And what I see doing wellness care is over and over and over, I see those people who have run into that wall, who have made that choice over their lifetime to not do the things to put their body in an environment that's congruent with health. And then eventually it starts catching up to them. And when it starts catching up to them, they start searching for solutions about how to solve their pain problem. And if you listen to the show on Tuesday, and we had Dr. Fraley in here from Ruidoso, New Mexico, he was talking about one of his most amazing cases that he had with anticipatory pain of a person that had their arm cut off. And that person was having extreme arm pain, but they didn't have an arm. And so if you want to go back and listen to that show, it's really cool. And we talked about it today. One of my patients said, if you guys can help a guy that doesn't have an arm, that has extreme arm pain, surely you can help me sleep better. And I just laughed, and we spent a little time talking about that, because that was really funny the way that she said that, because it's like, you would think we could help you sleep better if the one of the things chiropractic can do is help a guy that thinks he has arm pain that doesn't have an arm get better. And so what I learned back in the day is I learned the subluxation. And so when we're talking about kids getting adjusted, why would your kids get adjusted? They don't have back pain. Nope, they don't have back pain. And I don't want them to have back pain, but I definitely want to check their nervous system to make sure that their nervous system is free from interference. And then when you start that journey and you start working on that, and you start working on that for 23 years, and you work on it pretty much every single day for 23 years in some form or fashion, you just get deeper and deeper and deeper into where those interfering things come from and how the body processes those things. And I look at some of these old time chiropractors and I think, man, you guys must have, y'all have seen some stuff over the years. And that idea that we should be more like medical doctors, to me, is absolutely ridiculous. And it's ridiculous because the medical doctors are awesome at what they do. Like we've got great relationships in our office with medical doctors. We've got great relationships with physical therapists. We've got great relationships with all kinds of different providers. And I don't need to be like them because they've got that covered, right? I don't need to do the work that they do. We've got some of the best medical doctors in the world in the United States. We've got all the money, we've got all the diagnostics, all that sort of thing. It's just not my game. It's not what we do. And what we do in our office is wellness. And what wellness means is, can we figure out how to keep you in an environment where you can express yourself, where you can express health for as long as possible? We want you to make sure that you're expressing health as long as possible. And we kind of narrow it down to things like making sure you have proper nervous system function, making sure that you have proper nutrition. That's what Dr. Fraley was talking about on Tuesday, was fuel and fuel delivery. It's a really big deal. That's one of the things that we talked about with the patient that says, hey, can you help me sleep? Well, if I can help you sleep, the first thing I've got to do is I've got to get your brain to calm down. And one of the things that I've got to do to get your brain to calm down is make sure that you have enough nutrients in your brain for it to function properly. Because if your brain doesn't have the nutrients it needs, it won't function properly. And then you won't be able to get your brain to calm down. And then you won't be able to sleep. And so you keep diving into those things. So nutrition is super important. And then exercise. Exercise is super important. One of my last conversations I had right before we started the show was about osteoporosis. And I actually had about 3 or 4 conversations today about osteoporosis. I had 2 of them this afternoon that were talking about, well, I've got osteoporosis and now I've got to start something. And if I had a message to the young people that might be listening to the show, is that, let me tell you, it's coming. It's coming at you. All heart disease is coming at you. Cancer is coming at you. Kidney disease is coming at you. Osteoporosis is coming at you. And you can either choose to deal with it now, or you can deal with it when now you're right up in hitting the face with it, when it's time to, deal with it. It's like you got no choice, right? And so it's way better to try to do that at an early stage than a late stage. And I'm going to get into that. I want to read some of the information on that particular topic today. I know I've got some ideas on the website here that about the Ultra G and the Vibe plate and that sort of thing. But I want to make sure that that we talk about that one particular thing, because those people that came into the office today, I just want them to understand a little bit about what's going on as far as that goes. But I'll come back to that in just a minute. But when we're working in those subluxations, we kind of get into the 5 essentials of health: food, water, oxygen, rest, and nerve energy. And I learned those 5 essentials of health in the first 2 weeks I was working in chiropractic in March of 2000. Because after that 12-year period of time, and I went to work for my brother-in-law, I didn't understand what chiropractic was. When someone said to me, "What, like you get adjusted, like you go see a chiropractor?" And I'm like, "Yep." I mean, sometimes whenever my shoulder hurts or my back hurts or whatever, I was a pain management person. I was a Tylenol and Advil taking guy. I even got a flu shot once in 1999. Like I was just like every other person. I was raised just like every other person I knew. We drank Dr. Peppers. We ate pizzas. We chased the same girls. Like all that stuff. We, like all the guys I hung out with when I was growing up, I was just like all the rest of them. And when I'd get this flared up thing in my throat, when that gland would swell up, then Mom take me to the doctor and we'd take some drug, right? And I had the Accutane for the acne and all that stuff when I was growing up. I didn't know anything about anything that I talk about today, really. Like I just was I and I don't really know I didn't really know anybody else that I was growing up with that did either. In the 80s, it just wasn't that kind of thing. And so nowadays, it's like I've had one Tylenol in the last 23 years. It's like, and we were talking about that this morning in our staff meeting, and I was breaking down what exactly acetaminophen does to you. And look, it's not within my scope of practice to talk about medicine. It's not my thing, right? But I can talk about wellness. And so when you talk about wellness, it's like, well, what does Tylenol do to you? What does acetaminophen do to you? And how does your body get rid of acetaminophen? Well, one of the ways that your body gets rid of acetaminophen is you use what's called glutathione. And we made an attempt to break that down last week. I'm not sure if we got it recorded or not, but we made an attempt to break that down, and because that's your major antioxidant. Your major antioxidant is glutathione, and you use glutathione to break down toxins in your liver. And acetaminophen is a toxin. Have you ever wondered why, when you're taking those things, you got to take them every 4 to 6 hours? Like, why is that? Why do you have to take another one in 4 hours or take another one in 6 hours when you're taking those NSAIDs and all that stuff, right? Well, because your body breaks it down and gets rid of it. And then the next question is, why does your body break it down and get rid of it? Well, it breaks it down and gets rid of it because it doesn't want it inside of it. It's a toxin. And so one of the things that acetaminophen does is it uses up your glutathione in your liver when you are detoxing that acetaminophen. And so when the liver runs out of acetaminophen, out of glutathione, which now I'm getting technical again. I didn't mean to do that. When your major antioxidant that helps you detox your body, when you run out of it in your liver, then your liver is going to call out to the rest of your body to say, send me your glutathione, send me that antioxidant that helps me detox, because I've run out of it in the liver. And you know where it comes off of? It comes off of places like your lungs, and it comes off of your brain, and it comes off of your kidneys, and it goes into your liver. And that leaves your lungs and your brain vulnerable because you've taken it off of there. And that was one of the things that we went through with COVID, is this whole respiratory problem, right? It was a respiratory problem. And I got a bunch of people that have missed their appointments this week because they don't feel good, because they may be dealing with a respiratory issue, right? And so one of the things that I thought was crazy during that time as a wellness guy was that you get a fever and your body we never really think about that either, right? Like, why did we get a fever? We got a fever because our white blood cells sent a message to our brain to tell our brain to turn the temperature up, because the white blood cell really likes 102 and it hates, the virus likes 98.6, but it hates 102. So the white blood cell is the one that sent this thing called a cytokine. The cytokine is like a little chemical that goes up into the brain and tells the brain, hey, would you turn the thermostat up in here? Because we're fixing to get in a fight, and we need to try to make it as uncomfortable for that virus as we possibly can. Well, the brain turns the temperature up, so you feel bad. So you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, there's nothing we can do for you. Just go home and take Tylenol and NyQuil and do that for a week, and then call us back if you can't breathe. Well, Tylenol is acetaminophen and NyQuil is acetaminophen. And if you go to the National Institutes of Health and you study and you just Google a few of those National Institutes of Health recommendations on acetaminophen, it says don't double up on acetaminophen. And if you take it for any long period of time, you will deplete the glutathione in your lung. You will actually pull the glutathione out of the lung cell to go to the liver cell to fight off the acetaminophen. Well, if you've got a fight going on in the middle of your lungs, how does it make any sense to take your protective antioxidant out of your lung? And what happened? How many of us know somebody? How many of us know somebody that did something like that double dosed on acetaminophen over a 4 or 5 day period of time, and then they couldn't breathe? and they had to go back to the hospital and they couldn't breathe. It's like, why? Why did that happen? Why was it that was the case, right? And it's kind of like, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. Why would you, first of all, why would you going to get your fever? Now, when I got COVID, I went home and I had 102 fever for 11 straight days. And it's like, wow, why you didn't want to take some ivermectin or take some hydroxychloroquine or do something of that stuff? I was like, well, it wasn't in an emergency state, so I didn't figure I needed to take anything that you would use in an emergency state. I just went home and went to bed. And then every day I got up and walked up and down the sidewalk, and I sat out on the back porch and I tried to get as much vitamin D as I could. And I just waited for my fever to break. And I was waiting for my fever to break because that was telling me that my white blood cells had kicked tail and done their job. And my white blood cells, as we know now, were fighting something that they'd never seen before. And so it took them a few days to figure out exactly how to kill this thing off, right? I never was in any danger. I wasn't any problem. And one of the reasons I wasn't in any problem is because I wasn't inflamed. Because one of the things that increases that cytokine signal that we're talking about is inflammation. And so as soon as my white blood cells decided they were finished killing off that virus, they turned the temperature down. I was done with it, went back to work. I just stayed at home for 12 days. Actually, it was 14 days. And when it was done, could I have done it faster if I'd have taken some ivermectin or something like that? I don't know. Maybe I could have, but I'm not. That's not wellness to me. It's like allopathic. It's the same thing as taking some other drug for something. So I know it's kind of crazy when you hear somebody talk about that, but it's like, what can we do to get our body in a state where it can handle its environment without having interference in the system? And we go back to those 5 essentials of health: food, water, oxygen. When I say food, it's like, what food? What food are we talking about, right? Are we going to eat processed, refined food? Or are we going to eat complex carbohydrates, grass-fed meats, berries, nuts, the things that give us the nutrients that we need in order to put our body in an environment that it can handle itself, right? So we got to get good food. We got to get oxygen. So how do you get oxygen? Well, you got to walk. You got to exercise. You got to move your body. You got to get your body able to handle oxygen. You got to stress your body a little bit so that it'll try to suck that oxygen in and learn how to use it more efficiently, right? When we're working out, the people that we work out with in our gym, because we have a gym in our building, the Rock Health and Wellness Center has the Rock Fitness, and we've been working out for almost 4 years now. We started in January of 2020. January 2020 is when we started the Rock Fitness. And so we moved into a new building and we actually have fitness classes at 6, 7, and 8 in the morning because we're trying to get oxygen and we're trying to keep ourselves fit. And we use a CrossFit style workout. And I'm going to have an entire show about that. So don't worry, but we want to get oxygen into the tissue. And we want to be able to handle oxygen. So when we're working out and my people get tired, they're like, oh, I'm tired. I'm sore. The first thing I'll say is you're welcome. It's because what I mean by that is you're welcome that we put you in an environment to get you healthier. I think it's awesome. I'm glad you're tired. That's the most awesome thing you could be doing right now is be tired, right? So we got to have good food. We got to have oxygen. We got to have water of some kind. And we talked about that, I think, early in one of the earlier shows is right. Not carbonated water. I think I saw one of the famous doctors of America advertising SodaStream or something this week about carbonated water. And I was like, oh my gosh. I want everybody that's listening to do this. Breathe in. You just breathed in oxygen. The oxygen went into your lungs. It was picked up through the bloodstream. And now it's going to all of the cells in your body. Your body is using that oxygen as fuel. And now, watch this, blow out. What happened? You just blew out carbon dioxide. Why did you blow out carbon dioxide? Because your body doesn't want carbon dioxide in itself. It makes you acidic when you have too much carbon dioxide. It changes the state of your brain when you have too much carbon dioxide. So your body is breathing carbon dioxide out. What is carbonated water? It's water with carbon dioxide smashed into it, right? And so when we drink carbonated water, we're drinking the carbonation that our body doesn't want in it in the first place. Nobody explained that to me when I was a kid. Nobody explained it to me when I was an adult for a long time, right? They didn't really explain to me that you're increasing your acidity. And when we get back, I'm going to show you that one of the reasons that you have osteoporosis is because you have an increased amount of acidity in the body. So we're going to take a little break. And from the radio station, we'll stay live on the Facebook page. If you have any questions, please text us 806-794-0400, and we'd be glad to get those questions answered, or send us a message on Facebook, and we'll try to get those answered there as well. We'll be back in just a minute. We just make sure we don't have any questions from the Facebook group. So far, not tonight. I appreciate you guys listening. We had a couple of comments from last night's show that we could kind of talk about, and it was really if one of the questions was they need to contact for the EMDR, and the EMDR is the bottom up approach for trauma. So if you listened to last night's show and you were interested in any of that bottom up approach that's dealing with that emotional part of the brain that gets stuck whenever we're in trauma, then the just if you need contact for someone with that, please just get in touch with us. Call the office 806-794-0400. Send us a text. That our office phone is a cell phone, so you can send us a text and we'll answer that text, and I will send you the information on the people that I know here in town that um, that do EMDR. We've had patients that have gone through that treatment that have had great success with it. It's a resetting of that overstimulated amygdala that's in the lower brain on the right side. And so if you need some help with that, send us a text and I'll get you in touch with the people right there. We had a question a couple of nights ago, and I think I've got a little bit of time that I can answer it. We had a question about how you decrease anticipatory pain and what you do. There was one question about varicose veins, and I reached out to Dr. Fraley, and neither one of us know anything about that. So I'm just gonna get back to it. I'm gonna skip that question right there because I literally don't understand anything about what was being asked of us. The other question was, how do you decrease anticipatory pain? And if you want to go back and watch Tuesday's show, it will explain to you what that means, the anticipatory pain. And there are a couple of things that you could do. One of the things you can do is increase the muscle tone in the area. So whatever it is that's bothering you, if you can increase the muscle tone, it will change the way that the nervous system fires. The other thing you could do is to make sure that the area that it's coming into the spine is also working properly. And so if you have an area of your spine that's not working properly, then you can increase those types of pain. And then the last thing that would be is to work on proprioception, which is getting information from your feet. That's why we have the biplate here in the office, is to get that information from your feet. So let me get back on the radio here. Okay, everybody, we're back on the radio and we're back on the Facebook Live and the YouTube and the X. And so we were talking about the 5 essentials of health: food, water, oxygen. The fourth one is rest. You got to get good rest. And if you're not getting rest, your body's not going to function properly. And then the last one is nerve energy. You got to have proper nerve energy. And that's where the chiropractic part comes in, is to figure out if your nervous system is functioning the way it's supposed to function, and if your nervous system is firing the way that it's supposed to fire. And so that's one of those things that's really confusing to people, because they don't really understand what that means. They don't understand that my nervous system might not be firing properly. And that's why we in the office, we tried to get as many pieces of technology in the office that we can, so that we can test that. That's what we did the show on the right eye. We've got the reflex app. We've got the balance plates. We have the exams that we do. We use X-ray, and X-ray gives us a lot of information about how a person is firing and what's going on with that person. And we've talked about that a little bit on the show in the past. But if you, let me see if I can pull up an X-ray right quick. I'll show this X-ray. That's if you're watching the Facebook page, you can see it. If you're on the radio, I'll try to describe it to you. But what we're really doing right here is we're looking at what is normal and what is not normal when it comes to structure. And so when we evaluate a person's structure, we take the X-ray and we're trying to see what is normal and what is not normal. And when we look at it, we can draw lines on your vertebrae, and like, let's say we're taking a picture of your neck, and we're taking a picture of your neck from the side. And when we take that picture from your neck from the side, it gives us an angle, and it gives us an arc. And when we look at it, each one of the bones should be right on the line. So we have a green line and we have a red line. And the green line is the normal, and the red line is where the person is. But when we have an X-ray, what we're looking for is each one of the bones are right on the green line, and we're looking for space between each vertebrae. And that would be your disc. And so the disc space and the angle is how we determine whether or not your nervous system is firing properly from a structural standpoint. If we evaluate you and all of a sudden we notice that, okay, wait, your C2 vertebrae is about 15, 17, 20, 30, 40 inches forward from where it's supposed to be. The back of C2 is supposed to be on the green line, and the back of C2 is way out in front of the green line. That says, uh-oh, this whole thing is not proper. I can go up above that, and I can look at your very first vertebrae in your neck, and that's called your atlas, and that's otherwise called C1. And that angle of that atlas also tells me if there's any pressure on your nervous system, because your spinal cord is actually leaving your skull right there and going right through that C1. And that C1 is like a ring. And that ring is right in the middle of that ring is where your spinal cord goes through. So if your C1 vertebrae is not lined up properly, you can get pressure on your nervous system, and you can interfere with the communication of your body to your brain. And that's what we call a subluxation. The subluxation means interference in your nervous system. And so if we've got that interference, then we know that your nervous system is not firing properly, and that's what we try to correct. And then another thing that happens is when you lose the curve in your neck, you start to put pressure down on the disc. And when you start to put pressure down on the disc becomes dry and brittle over a period of time, and they begin to chip away, and they call that degenerative disc disease. Now, one of the things that I had this conversation again today. I've got a patient in the office who's been with us since he started working out with us in 2020 when we started our fitness program, and he's been taking his fish oil for, I know, at least 3 years and 3.75. And so we just got finished testing him the other day on his omega-6-3 ratio. And his omega-6-3 ratio is 1.1 to 1. It's the lowest one that I've ever tested. And He's been doing a fabulous job with his omega-3s for the last 3 years. Well, now all of a sudden he's got some hip problems. He was working out, and if we flared something up in his hip or something's going on in his hip, he's seen me, he's seen his physical therapist, he's seen his medical doctor, and the medical doctor said to him, "I think you have arthritis in your hip." And I wanna make and I said, "Okay, wait a minute. That word right there is so overused and so misused, in my opinion, that it makes everybody out there really confused about what that means." And there are people that have diseases of arthritis, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when someone says they have arthritis. If you break down arthritis, arthritis means artho means joint, ARTHO means joint, and itis means inflammation. So what they're saying to you is that you have joint inflammation. Well, I've got arthritis in my neck. How do you know? Well, they took an X-ray and they told me that they have arthritis in your neck. But if you're looking on Facebook and I show you this X-ray right here, or you're on YouTube or X, if I show you an X-ray, and if you're on the radio, if I just listen to this statement, if I showed you a picture of it, which was an X-ray, could you tell me if this person was alive or dead? The answer is no. I could take an X-ray of a dead person, and I could show you an X-ray of a dead person, and then I could ask you, does this person have neck pain? Does this person have inflammation in their neck? No. Dead people, as far as we know, and I don't have any concrete proof on this, but dead people don't have pain in their neck, right? So, in order to have pain in the neck, you have to report that you have pain in the neck. Well, you went to the doctor because your neck was hurting. The doctor took an X-ray, and the doctor says that you have arthritis in your neck. That is not proper. You have what the doctor really means to tell you is that you have degeneration in your neck. You may have decreased disc space in your neck. You may have bone spurring in your neck. You may have end plate disruption in your neck. But it doesn't mean that you have inflammation in your neck, because I could show you 100 X-rays. I could put together 100 X-rays, and I could show you 100 X-rays of people that have degeneration in their neck that don't have any pain in their neck. Because arthritis is inflammation of the joint, and degeneration is not necessarily the cause of degeneration of inflammation in the joint. Degeneration doesn't mean that you have pain. Degeneration means that you have degeneration. And so when we look at an X-ray in the office, I don't know if the person's neck hurts or the person's neck doesn't hurt. They have to tell me that. But that is functional. That is not structural. That is functional. That is not structural. So we can't tell whether or not a person has inflammation in their neck. We can't tell if they have pain in their neck unless they tell us that. But by looking at a picture, I can't tell you whether or not your neck hurts or your neck doesn't hurt, unless obviously you've got some sort of serious fractured bone or something like that. It might be easy to say, well, that's pretty. I mean, if I had an X-ray of a dead person that had a fractured bone, they wouldn't have any pain. But so that's something that we get a lot, right? We get that degeneration idea that's turned into arthritis. Well, this guy that has the hip problem, they said, well, I think you have arthritis in your hip. Well, I can tell you right now, he doesn't have arthritis in his hip because he doesn't have any inflammation in his body. I asked him, do you have joint pain anywhere else? And he's like, no, I don't have joint pain anywhere else. And I'm like, you know why you don't have joint pain anywhere else? Because you have a 1.1 to 1 omega-6-3 ratio. Your inflammation level is extremely low. And so you don't have that problem. And so what it tells me is that there's something else going on in that hip or somewhere in the low back or something else. It's not an inflammatory process. He doesn't need to go home, take a bunch of NSAIDs and take a bunch of anti-inflammatory drugs. That's not his problem. His problem is something else that's causing the malfunction of that hip. And his physical therapist thinks that he's got a torn ligament in his hip, and he may be completely right. I think his physical therapist is a really smart dude, so I trust that guy a lot. And he may have a complete understanding of that. So that's just one area that we look for when we're looking for interference in the nervous system. So food, water, oxygen, rest, and nerve energy. We want to make sure that you have nerve energy, and that we can test that in a couple of different ways to see if it's firing properly. So I want to take a few minutes and I want to address the the idea that we had, because I had this conversation with two people this afternoon about osteoporosis and the misconceptions about what osteoporosis is. And you say, well, why are you talking about osteoporosis? Because if you have osteoporosis, you could break your hip. And if you break your hip, that's going to cause biomechanical problems in your spine and in your body. And it's going to create massive disruption in your nervous system. So we want to try to make sure that you don't have osteoporosis so that you don't get subluxated. So that's how I'm tying that back to the to that right there. And so one of the smartest guys I ever got taught by was my nutrition teacher in chiropractic school. And his name was Dr. James Guest. And he was a former, in his early life, he was a detective for the Las Cruces, New Mexico police department. And so he was the kind of guy that was just about the facts. He would just tell me the facts. And he was a diplomate in nutrition. And he wrote a book. It's a really awesome book. And it's called Extreme Health: The Nutrition Connection by James H. Guest, DC, CCN. And I've searched all over. I actually got this as a gift from one of the doctors here in town because he knew that I had given out my book and I hadn't gotten it back. And so he brought it. He brought me a copy of that he found online, and he actually found it signed. So I ended up by friendship and divine intervention of getting an actual signed book by Dr. Guest. So it's really awesome. But he talks about osteoporosis. We're often told that osteoporosis is caused not by eating enough calcium, or caused by not eating enough calcium. But let's look at a couple of studies. Research conducted at the Mayo Clinic found that women with the highest consumption of calcium had just as much bone loss as did those with the lowest consumption of calcium. And a study at Harvard with using tens of thousands of nurses found that those with the highest calcium supplementation intake actually had 45% higher risk of fracture. And you combine that with the knowledge that women in many cultures consume far less calcium than American women, yet have very little osteoporosis, and it begins to appear that dietary calcium deficiency is not the primary cause. And we've been kind of sold this idea that the reason that you have osteoporosis, or the reason that you have bone loss, is because you don't have enough calcium in your bloodstream. And that's just not factually true. There are several reasons, and the three primary factors are diet, exercise, and hormones. And that's where we get back to eating a proper diet. One of the patients came in today and said she just got slapped in the face because she just got diagnosed with osteoporosis, and her doctor wants to put her on some sort of osteoporosis medication. And she asked me what I thought about that. And of course I said, well, that's between you and your doctor, because I can't put you on or take you off any medication. But what I can talk to you about is what I know about osteoporosis, because we need vitamins. We need magnesium and vitamin C and vitamin D and many more nutrients for us to function properly. But some of the things is we're creating an acidic environment inside of our body. Whenever we create an acidic environment inside our body and we don't balance that properly, then one of the things that our body does is it pulls calcium from the bone to balance the acidity. And that can cause the osteoporotic problem right there. And one of them is acid ash, and that's what we get with animal protein is metabolized. And I'm not an anti-animal protein guy, but I really think we should balance those animal proteins. That's why we always talk about eating meat and vegetables. We try to eat green leafy vegetables. Eat your asparagus, eat your broccoli, eat your spinach leaves. I don't care what other doctors talk about with spinach leaves. I think that stuff is good for you to eat, And what you're going to do is you're gonna balance out some of the animal proteins that you need for all kinds of functions inside your body. Whenever you become too acidic, excess phosphorus is also one of those things that competes for absorption. That's why it just makes me ill. We used to go to the ballpark when the kids were little, and I'd see moms at the ballpark that would have a sippy cup with Dr. Pepper in it, or some sort of soda, right? Well, those sodas are high in phosphorus, and phosphorus and calcium compete for absorption. So if you have a high phosphorus diet, you're not even getting the calcium in the bones in the first place. So the little kids that started drinking Cokes, sodas when they were had a sippy cup, those little kids are going to end up with higher levels of osteoporosis when they get older because never did develop that bone like they were supposed to in the first place. Another one is arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid is a type of fatty acid found primarily in animal products. This fatty acid produces substances that promote inflammation and in excess can break down bone and inhibit tissue repair. Inflammation is an important part of healing, but when our diet and lifestyle contains too many pro-inflammatory factors, not enough anti-inflammatory ones, we are in trouble. And we broke that down when we broke down omega sixes and omega threes, right? So when we have too many omega sixes, our body has an excess amount of arachidonic acid. When we don't have enough omega threes, we can't balance that omega six load, and especially in whenever we have insulin, whenever we eat sugar at the same time, then our body turns arachidonic acid into that pro-inflammatory prostaglandin, and now we're going to get inflammation, right? The next one is homocysteine, and that's another one. So we want to make sure that our homocysteine levels are proper. So those are some of the dietary factors that are associated with osteoporosis. Exercise is another a major factor. Exercise is one of the major factors when it comes along to osteoporosis. Bone is a living tissue and responds to physical stress just like muscle. It gets stronger. So many types of exercises that puts more stress than usual on bones can be helpful. There's all kinds of science that talks about if you stimulate the bone has two different cells, and I know I'm going to get a little technical right here, but the bone has two different cells. It has an osteoblast, which makes new bone, and it has an osteoclast, which breaks down bone. And when we have what we want is we want to increase osteoblast activity. And when we have weight bearing exercise or we put load on it, like this morning in the gym, we were doing step ups onto the box. And I was telling them, hey, look, when you hit the top of that step, really hit it hard. Bring your foot down hard on the top of that step so that you send that shock wave through your leg so that your bone receives that shock wave. One of the things you can do to increase bone density, according to the National Institutes of Health, is just hop up and down. If you just hopped up and down in place and you did that, I think it was 100 times, 50 to 100 times a day. If you just hopped up and down, you would create enough energy going through that bone to activate those osteoblasts to increase bone density. And so that's another way that you can increase bone density is to just hop up and down, right? So a group of women in one study actually gained bone mass simply by jumping up and down 50 times a day. There it is right there. The gravitational stress as you hit the ground and push off again tells your entire body that it needs to become stronger to resist the forces. Jogging, running in place, etc. can also help. If you already have advanced osteoporosis, the force of jumping could actually cause a fracture, so you'd want to talk to your doctor about the risk and build up very slowly. So that's a very good point. If you already have osteoporosis, be super careful about doing that. But if you're in osteopenia, which is before osteoporosis, then you have a chance to build some of that bone. So walking doesn't put as much stress on the bones as other activities, and research indicates that it is not as effective. Walking is, however, a really good way to improve your cardiovascular system, lose weight, control blood sugar, raise HDL, all that other stuff. It's also the second most fabulous thing that you could do for your brain. And so the number one thing that you can do for your brain is to be social. That's the best thing you can do for your brain. And then the last thing is hormones. You got to make sure that your hormones are working properly. A third major factor is hormones. Somewhere around the age of 35, a woman's bone mass begins to decrease at a rate of approximately 1% per year. When then at menopause, the decline accelerates to around 3% per year for about 5 years, then slows to 1.5% per year. So when you get into estrogen, you get into estrogen replacement, you get into the hormones that are involved. That also is involved in how your body is, whether or not it's going to accelerate or not accelerate when it comes to osteoporosis. And I just thought that was that's three areas right there: diet, exercise, and hormones to help you deal with your osteoporosis. And if you're dealing with it right there, that might be something that you want to talk to your doctor about and see if there's alternative ways that you can go about increasing your bone density or at least stopping any loss of your bone density. And before you get to that point, if you clean up your diet and really make sure that you're eating proper, that's going to help you tremendously as well. The last thing I want to hit before we go, and I want because I want to go back because I had a few questions or comments about last night's show, and I don't want to get too deep into the troubling part of what we talked about last night with trauma, but I do want to share just a little bit of the thought process that went along with that with what Dr. Vanderkolk was talking about last night was the difference between the lower brain and the upper brain. And the lower brain is, if you didn't get the show last night, please go back and watch. It'd be great. But that lower brain, if you think about the brain that you're born with, the brain that you had on the day that you were born, the brain that you had when you were 3 years old, the brain that you had when you were 7 years old, the brain that you had when you were 15 years old, that was a lower emotional brain. And that lower emotional brain is where that major stress response signaler that we call the amygdala is located. It's in that lower emotional brain. And whenever that person has trauma, that amygdala is getting overstimulated and now it's taking over what's going on in the brain, right? Well, the rational brain is what we develop as we age and get into our late teens, early 20s, and then from that point forward, now we're getting up into that upper brain. And the thing that I just wanted to go back and touch on was a top-down approach is the idea of talking someone through their problems. And that's really hard to do for a person who has had trauma because they're not able to talk, because they're not able to use that rational brain properly. And the upper brain, the rational brain, is not in charge of what's going on anymore. And so that's really hard for that person to do that. We actually had that conversation the first thing this morning. One of my patients came in and said, as I would listen to the show, and they were talking about someone they were trying to pray for, and it was talking about how difficult it was for them. And then I had another patient come in and talk about how they were getting a divorce. Their friend was getting a divorce because their husband just couldn't handle the things, and he was the one with the post-traumatic stress. And I wanted to just encourage that couple. I wanted to encourage my patient that to not give up hope. You just might need to find the right person that can help you right there, because it's very difficult. That person that's caught up in that trauma is not going to make rational decisions. And that's what the lady said this morning. She's like, the husband just doesn't make rational decisions. And it was like, nope, because that part of the brain is not being accessed. It doesn't have it can't function properly because that lower emotional part of the brain has taken over. And when that lower emotional part of the brain takes over, that person is not going to make rational decisions. They're not going to make good decisions, and they're going to cause all kinds of chaos. And that particular relationship might have already been gone too far. It might have been they're going to get their divorce and they can't fix that. But maybe if they could get just a little bit of help, or that if that person that was dealing with it could get the proper help, maybe that person will have a chance to um, restore proper brain function. So we've come to the end of the hour. I know this was a little all over the place tonight, but I just wanted to touch on some of these things. And we appreciate you. If you have any questions, please send us a text. And otherwise, we will talk to you guys tomorrow night.